some of you, many of you. So what we're going to do this evening is we're going to look at some Haggadah hacks, how to make the Seder enjoyable, meaningful, memorable, and do it correctly. Try and do everything correctly, all within an hour. Now, I was a little bit ambiguous whether it was that the class would be within an hour or the Seder that I teach you how to do will be within an hour. The class will definitely be within an hour. And the Seder, at least the important chunk of it, will also be within an hour if you follow the instructions that I offer you this evening. So this is not because we want to rush the Seder. On the contrary, we'd love to spend the whole night doing the Seder. However, sometimes not everybody that is present also shares that sentiment. And often we find ourselves at a Seder of various people who are coming from various different angles. Not all of them are happy to spend the entire night at the Seder. And so we want the experience to be memorable, enjoyable, and accessible for everybody who may be there. And so that's what I'm going to try and help you do. Having run Seders for many, many years, since I was about 16 or 15, also for a very mixed crowd. So I know what it means to have a boring Seder, and that's terrible. That's not the point. On the other hand, when it is engaging, it could be an unforgettable, transformative experience. And many of us think back to some of those Seders that we've had that we do really remember. They impact us forever. So if you are running a Seder or hosting a Seder, hopefully in the next short amount of time, we will be able to cover what you need to do to make it properly and also to make it enjoyable. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to go through the Haggadah Hacks. And there will be time for questions, maybe during and certainly at the end. So hold on to those questions and take note. I will be able to share this presentation with you afterwards as well. I can send it to you along with other resources that I'm very happy to share. But so you could just listen, you can write down your little notes. I'm also recording it and we'll make it available. So important to note is that on the night of the Seder, there are several mitzvahs, commandments, some of them Torah commandments, some of them rabbinical commandments, and there are also several customs that we're going to try to achieve. There are two mitzvahs that the Torah says you need to do on the night of the Seder. One is to eat matzah. And number two is to tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt. Those two mitzvahs are Torah commandments. Then there are three rabbinical commandments that the rabbis in Talmudic times and earlier added. One of them is to drink 4 cups of wine or grape juice, leaning to the left side. That's a rabbinical commandment. Number 2 is to eat maror, bitter herbs, dipped in charoset, a pasty, sweet type of condiment. That is a rabbinical mitzvah. That's not just a nice thing, it's a rabbinical commandment to do. And number 3 is to recite Hallel, verses of praise, psalms of praise at the Seder. So 2 Torah commandments, eating matzah, telling the story. 3 rabbinical commandments, drinking 4 cups of wine, eating the maror, and reciting the Hallel, songs of praise. And then there are customs, many customs, but primarily customs, meaning it's not a mitzvah in the Torah or even a rabbinical mitzvah, but it's customary to do it. One of them is to eat the vegetable dipped in salt water known as karpas. Number 2 is to eat the Hillel sandwich, a combination of matzah, bitter herbs, and the charoset. Number 3, to eat an egg dipped in salt water. It's custom. Many people think it's a law. It's actually just a custom, a tradition. And number 4, to eat the afikoman matzah, a piece of matzah at the very end of the Seder. We're going to go through all of those things in more detail, what they mean and what they are. But what I'm presenting to you now is that this list here is what you want to achieve on the night of the Seder. And you want to challenge the people who are at your Seder to also do this. It's important to realize that the Seder is not just a nice dinner with some extra readings, but it's actually a night that we have certain mitzvahs, obligations to fulfill. And some of them are easier than others, but they're all quite, in the end, quite pleasant. However, you want to sort of lay down a challenge that this is what we're out to do. And if you're running the Seder, if you're hosting the Seder, so your, I guess, responsibility, particularly if you're a little bit more knowledgeable than those around you, is to help people fulfill those mitzvahs, those commandments in the correct way, in the proper way, but also in a meaningful and enjoyable way. So this is our sort of list of to-dos for the night of the Seder, what we want to make sure that we fulfill and we do. Now, keep in mind that there is a lot to get through in fulfilling all of these things, and it is going to take a certain amount of time. And so you need to pace your Seder according to your crowd. The timing is going to be extremely important. And as we go through it, I'm going to show you the hacks to try and make things quicker without compromising in any way on fulfilling the Seder properly. And there are a few things that you need to keep in mind as we're going along as far as the timing of the Seder. If you've got a, let's say, more mature crowd who are more engaged in any way, you can afford to stretch things out and spend more time. If you have a crowd that's less engaged or younger, kids, for example, you need to keep things moving. It can't be too late. You're going to lose them, or you're going to lose the crowd. Sometimes not just the kids, but others are halfway out the doors as soon as the dessert has been served. So you do want to try and say, we've got a long night, but we want to prepare ourselves to try and get through everything. So here's a checklist of what you need. And this you need all in advance. This you need to be shopping and ordering and doing all in advance and having at your home ready to go for the Seder. You need Haggadot. You need the Haggadah, which we're going to go through which ones and what to choose. But it's important to have Haggadot, something to read. That's what we're going to base our entire night on. You need matzah. That's going to be important as well. You need wine and or grape juice, enough for everybody. You need a wine cup for everybody. So, some type of wine cup. It could be plastic, or you can have something nicer, but everyone needs a cup. Lettuce and horseradish, we'll see, those two things are for the bitter herbs. Charoset ingredients to make the paste. You need salt water, that is salt and water. A chicken neck. You also need rest in advance, and you need a full stomach in advance. It's a very bad idea to come to a Seder tired, because then you're not going to make it through. And to come to a Seder hungry is also a bad idea, because it's long and the eating comes a little bit later. So this is something that for you, if you're running or hosting the Seder, you need to know this. You need to be well rested. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of preparation for Seder, but it's important to be well rested beforehand. Thank God this year we have Shabbos immediately before the Seder. So there's not much we can do on Shabbos. In fact, nothing we can do on Shabbos to prepare for the Seder except for sleeping. And so that is an advantage of this year, that we can come to the Seder a bit more well rested, and a full stomach as well, noting that you're going to be eating late. The Seder can only start late. It can only start at 7:42, I think it is this year. You can't start the Seder before nightfall. And that's just starting the Seder. By the time you're actually getting to the food, it's going to be really late. So people who are coming to your Seder should know this in advance, especially if they're less initiated into the Seder traditions. Make sure you've eaten something before in the afternoon, so you're not coming starving. If you invite someone for dinner and you say we're going to start at 7:45, and you sit down, and then before you know that, you make Kiddush, you have a little piece of vegetable, and that's it. And you start reading a book, and they start looking at the size of the book and counting the pages ahead to see how many pages to go until the meal. They're going to freak out. But if they have a full stomach from before, at least they've eaten something before, they're not coming hungry, you'll have a more attentive crowd. Very important to prep the crowd, as well as prepping all the ingredients, to prep the crowd to be in the right frame of mind beforehand. Moving on, let's go into detail in these things. Matzah I've put first, even though it's not first on the night, but as far as preparations, it's important to get the right matzah. It's preferable to use handmade shmura matzah for the Seder. There are many people who only use shmura matzah for the entire Pesach, but at least for the Seder night, it is better, halachically considered better to use shmura matzah. Shmura means that it was guarded. The wheat was guarded from the time it was cut. As soon as the wheat was cut from the fields, it was guarded to make sure it did not get moist until it became matzah in the box. Regular matzah that you buy is guarded only from when it became flour, not when it was cut from the wheat. So shmura means guarded. It was guarded all the way from the reaping, and that is considered the best way to do the mitzvah. And the handmade one is the one that it's made in the same tradition all the way back till the exodus from Egypt. So it's definitely better to have shmura matzah. But to do this, you need to order it. It's not found readily necessarily. I have seen it in Coles. Last year they sold it. They sold it in Coles. So you just go to the supermarket and it's there. That's amazing. But it may or may not be this year, or may run out. There are people you can order it from. I can give you their details. But I would say this you should be doing around now, if you haven't done it yet, to make sure you have shmura matzah. Be in touch with me if you need help with that. Amounts are important. You need approximately 2 of those matzahs, or very least 1 matzah for each person at the Seder, but really 2 ideally, because the amount of matzah that needs to be eaten is quite a bit. To do the mitzvah, it's not enough to have a little nibble of matzah. You have to eat a measure of matzah. The measure is about 1/3 of that round matzah. You have to eat when doing the mitzvah of eating matzah. But that's not the only time we eat matzah. We eat matzah when we make the blessing on matzah. We then eat matzah as a part of the Hillel sandwich. 2 pieces of matzah with the bitter herb and charoset inside. And that is another 1/3 or 2/3 of matzah, preferably. We also eat matzah at the very end of the Seder, called the Afikoman, which is to commemorate the Pesach sacrifice that was eaten at the end of the meal. Instead, we don't have the sacrifice because we don't have the temple, so we eat another piece of matzah, preferably 1/3 of matzah. So really, it's between 1 and 2 matzahs per person at the Seder. That's what you need. So you need to work it out. In the kilo boxes of matzah, there's about 8 matzahs that come. So that's good for 4 people, 4, 5, 6 people. But you need to work that out to make sure you have enough matzah for everyone at the Seder. Now, that's all I'm talking about, by the way, throughout this is 1 Seder. If you're doing 2 Seders, 2 nights, hosting 2, then everything's doubled, of course. So make sure you have enough matzah and you've ordered it in advance. A time saver for this is to make matza bags for each person, meaning get a Ziploc plastic bag, a nice big one, and have in that bag the amount of matzah that each person is going to need for the night. So you know how many guests are coming. You make that many bags with that much matzah in it that they will need for the night. This is a huge time saver because otherwise, each person is getting matzah, needing some more, getting up, going around, passing it around. That can lose a lot of time when you're just organizing the matzahs. But if you do this in advance, have a bag of matzah for each person, so then they've got it with them the entire time, and they don't need to get from the box, stand up, move around. It saves a huge amount of time. In addition to that, on the time-saving topic, washing hands is a huge time loss at the Seder. There are 2 times when we wash our hands at the Seder. One of them right at the beginning, right after making Kiddush, we wash without making a blessing before eating the vegetable, the karpas dipped in the salt water. So that's one time. And the second time is after reading the whole Haggadah, the whole story of the Exodus, we do the mitzvah of eating matzah, we wash again, and this time with a blessing. Now, 2 times washing, many have the custom that both times everybody at the Seder, at the table, washes. Some have the custom only the leader washes the first time, but really everyone should wash both at the first time and the second time. Lining up to wash takes time. If you have a larger crowd, it takes more time. If you've only got one place to wash, so then that can be 15 minutes of just washing, and doing that twice is half an hour of your Seder. We're trying to do it in under an hour. We just lost half an hour just washing hands, especially if people are doing it slowly. So try and maximize the washing stations that you have. If you've only got one sink, you can fill up a big bucket of water, and people can wash into a bin. or into another bucket. So you have fresh water, people washing into another bucket, and that will double your washing capability and halve the time. It makes a huge difference. The washing, you can lose a lot of time at the Seder. So be well prepared with your Matza bags and with your washing stations to make the washing quicker. Next, telling the story, the Haggadah. This is the thing that takes the longest really at the Seder, and there's the most, I guess, this is the most important part of the Seder. Remember, Matzah and telling the story, the two Torah commandments on the night of the Seder. And this is the most meaningful part, but you've got to make sure that it moves at a good pace. So to make this meaningful, enjoyable, number one, everyone should have the same Haggadah. You may have accumulated various different Haggadot over the years, and that's lovely to look at, but it's not nice when you're running a Seder and people don't know what page you're on or what you're up to, and everyone has a different thing. It makes a huge difference if everyone has the same Haggadah. And so to do that, you can either go and buy Haggadot, or you can download entire Haggadot and print them yourself or get them printed for free. These are available online, and I'll share the links with you as well. So which Haggadah should you choose? So I would suggest that if you have an English-speaking crowd, then you definitely need an English Haggadah, translation in English, but a good translation. There are nice, beautiful Haggadot that maybe our grandparents used and we may have inherited them, but the English is from their grandparents' time, and we don't understand what's going on. And when you read it, it's not accessible. However, there are new, very nicely done Haggadot that have great readable English. It's translated with a little bit more embellishment so you can actually follow what's going on. Extremely important that people can relate to the Haggadah, and that's, you've got to get the right Haggadah. I would say that there are some parts that should be done in Hebrew if you're capable of doing it, even though most of it I would say to do just in English. Because the point of Haggadah is to tell the story. You can't tell a story in a language that people don't understand. That's not telling a story. That's saying a prayer, but it's not telling a story. So for the majority of the Haggadah, do it in English. For certain parts, it's nice to do in Hebrew. The Kiddush, for example, the Kiddush prayer, it's nice to do that in Hebrew if you're capable. Some of the songs, Manish Tana, and some of the well-known songs or the songs that you know to do in Hebrew, it adds a lot. The blessings, there's a blessing that you say before eating the matzah, before eating the maror. To say that in Hebrew is ideal. If you can't do that, all of that can be done in English, but it's nice, I think, to include Hebrew if you're capable, and people can read along the English. And if you announce that, if you say, I'm reading this in Hebrew, you can follow it in English, then people don't feel disconnected, even if they don't understand what's going on. But it's totally fine to do it all in English. What I would not suggest is to doing it all in Hebrew and in English. That doubles the time, and it stretches it out unnecessarily. The point is to tell the story in a way that's understandable. So the Haggadot that I'm suggesting and that I'll send you links to, not only do they have good readable English, they also have good instructions. It says in the Haggadah what to do next and tells people what to do. You may be leading it and telling people, but for them to be able to read and see what's happening next and what they're supposed to do helps a lot. Good instructions, and also a bit of an attractive layout, something that's a bit colorful and pleasing to the eye, makes a big difference when you're sitting there looking at this text for the entire time. Haggadah is putting out, I think it's coming out this week, a link on their site for a printable Haggadah that is beautiful and new, a brand new one that they've done, specifically aimed for people who are less knowledgeable, that they should be able to engage with the Haggadah story. So that's going to be great, and I'll send out the link, but you can find it on Haggadah sometime this week. You need to do also some preparation on the Haggadah by preparing insights that you can share during the reading of the Haggadah. And here you do have to be a little bit choosy in what you say. You may prepare a lot and find a lot of really fascinating and wonderful ideas, but at the actual table, long sermons and speeches are not going to go down well, and too many interruptions, too many explanations are not going to go down well either. And so you've got to be very careful and choosy and picky what you do and what you don't share. Quick explanations, short ideas, little insights are really helpful, and you can find a lot of them on Chabad.org as well. A time saver as far as explaining the Haggadah, you can't explain every part. So choose carefully and make sure things are moving. Keep the pace going. So you have to have like a bit of dynamic going on at the Seder. There are certain songs that we sing, and that moves things along, more familiar songs and people can sing along. Then there's certain lulls where there's just a lot of reading and not many songs. That's where you need to throw in a little story, a little insight, a little something to engage in. That keeps things moving. And what you can do is print out some of the insights. Instead of saying them, print them out and have them on the table. And people can read them for themselves. That, you know, people space out a little bit or not exactly following. They might want to read a little insight or look at something else. Have them on the table so people can do it themselves. And you can also save some of the discussion to have during the meal. The reading of the Haggadah, during that time, it's approximately half an hour. It's about half an hour of reading if you just go through it with a little bit of explanation. Not going too deep into anything, but not rushing through it. It's about half an hour of reading. When you were little, it seemed like 5 hours. And when you're hungry, it does seem a little bit longer than half an hour too. But in actual fact, if you look from after we've had the washing the hands, the karpas, the breaking the matzah, to actually just read the Haggadah until we're already washing to have the matzah, it's only half an hour of reading. And that's not rushing it. So you have to think, in that half an hour, how much can I pack into there? How much can I squeeze in? How much longer can we go than half an hour with my crowd? Now, I may be exaggerating this rushing and the crowd. You may have a crowd that really wants to debate and discuss and go into things. Fantastic, wonderful. But think also, you have to think ahead. Do they know what's coming next? Do they know that if we spend too long here, there's still more after the meal we have to do. After eating, there's more Haggadah that we have to do. And so make sure that you're pacing things correctly for your crowd. But this is the most important part. So you want this to not be overlooked. Now, what I haven't included here is the question of skipping parts of the Haggadah. Now, technically, there are more important parts of the Haggadah that are more emphasized. And there are parts that technically, if you didn't read it, you've still fulfilled the obligation. I didn't want to go into that because once we're chopping up the Haggadah, we're watering down the experience to some extent. But in very extenuating circumstances, there are parts that can be shortened. But generally speaking, don't go into the Seder with that in mind. Go into the Seder saying we're gonna do this whole thing. Some parts we're going to gloss over a bit quicker. Some parts we're going to go into, and allow for questions. Allow people to ask questions as you're going along. Some questions you'll be able to engage with at the time. Some you have to say, oh, we'll have to think about that, or we'll discuss that later. But the interaction is good. But rather than cut down the Haggadah, I would say spend more time on some parts, and other parts this year we'll have to go quicker. Maybe next year we'll go into more deeply. Okay. 4 cups of wine. Now, this is one of the rabbinical commandments mentioned earlier. On the night of the Seder, it's a mitzvah to drink 4 cups of wine or grape juice. And the first one is the Kiddush. Right at the beginning, we make Kiddush. And the tradition is for everybody, not just one person to make Kiddush, like is usually done on Friday night, but everybody to lift up their cups and make Kiddush together. And then to sit down and drink the cup leaning to the left side as a sign of royalty. The cup itself, it's not just a sip of wine, like you hear Kiddush and you have a little sip of wine or grape juice. Here, there is a minimum of how much you need to drink to fulfill the mitzvah of drinking 4 cups. The cup itself needs to be a cup of 86 milliliters minimum, which is a small cup. That's not very big. This cup is like 200 milliliters. So it's like the bottom half of this, which is thinner than the top half. So about that water is probably a little bit more than 86 mils. So that's the minimum cup that you have to have. Now, it's preferable on the night of the Seder, each time when you drink these 4 cups, to drink the entire cup down, preferably even all at once. Generally, we say that's a rude thing to do. It's gluttonous to drink a whole cup down at once. You should drink a little bit slower. But on the night of the Seder, because this is a mitzvah to drink 4 cups, we drink it down with more alacrity and enthusiasm. We drink the whole cup down, preferably. If you can't do that, at the very least, you need to drink the majority of the cup. So an 86 milliliter cup is the smallest cup, and the majority of that you're supposed to drink at the minimum, preferably the entire cup. However, if you use a cup of this size, so then you still have to fill the cup with the grape juice or the wine, and you still have to drink the majority of this cup, whatever cup you've got. So you have to drink 4 cups of wine. And for most of us, that is a lot. And so better to have smaller cups that you can fill up and drink majority or even all of, than have bigger cups that people are going to have a little sip of and not really fulfill the mitzvah properly. So get the right size cups. Again, that you can get plastic cups that are small, even 100 mil ones are pretty small. But get cups that people will be able to drink, even down the whole thing, if not at least the most of it. You need to have a good supply of wine, grape juice, and people can mix the two. So it's preferable to use wine if you're able to drink wine. If for any reason wine is not good for you, or you're underage, so then you should drink grape juice. And if you just don't want to drink so much wine, you can mix it with grape juice as well. You can even mix it with water. You can mix wine with water or grape juice with water. If somebody's very sensitive to grape juice, you can mix that with water. It has to be, the minimum is 1 part grape juice to 3 parts water, which is quite diluted. If you have that would still be considered grape juice if it's that much. So that's just the minimums and the maximums. But you want everyone there to fulfill the mitzvah correctly, and so therefore have the supplies of the wine, the grape juice, and know your crowd of what they need as far as the sizes of cups as well. A little time saver here: make sure you remove all the corks before the Seder. Don't get to time for Kiddush and say, okay, we've got to open the bottles. Where's the corkscrew again? I put it away last Pesach. I'm sure I know where it is. And you're looking for the corkscrew, and then you find it, and then one by one you're opening the bottles. That you can lose there 20 minutes. We were trying to do under an hour. You've lost 20 minutes on opening the corkscrew. You've half an hour on washing hands, and you've already lost the hour. Whereas if you've opened the bottles in advance, so they're all ready to go, so then you're much better off. The time is going to be much better. In fact, the timing of the first cup of wine, that is very important. You cannot make Kiddush, which is the first of the 4 cups of wine, until nightfall on the night of the Seder. In this year, because it's Shabbos, you actually can't do any preparation or anything on Shabbos until Shabbos ends, which is, I think it's 7:42, 7:43 here in Sydney. So really nothing can be done until then. You can prepare stuff before Shabbos to some extent. You can have things ready. You can have the bottles open and pop the cork back in. You can have the table set before Shabbos if you're not going to use it. There are certain things you can do. On Shabbos itself, you can't make preparations. So the best thing would be to have as much as possible prepared before Shabbos. So when Shabbos ends, you can very quickly start the Seder. The earliest possible to be making Kiddush. That's what you have to be aiming at. And so anything that can be done and be ready should be done in advance. That will save you a huge amount of time. But this year, it's harder because of Shabbos. Okay, let's move on to the maror, the bitter herbs. Now, bitter herbs are defined in the Talmud. There are several different types of herbs that are considered bitter herbs. The most famous one is horseradish, but you also need to eat a full measure of bitter herbs. And if you eat pure horseradish, that is going to be extremely difficult. And so the overriding custom is to use a mixture of cos lettuce and fresh ground horseradish. Cos lettuce is also considered a bitter herb, even though it doesn't taste all that bitter, but the stalks are quite bitter, at least when they're in the ground. And so it's still considered a bitter herb. And so to eat the correct amount of horseradish would be too hard, but if you mix it with cos lettuce, it'll be much easier. Now, when I say horseradish, we're talking about fresh horseradish, not the stuff that you buy in a jar. In the jar, it's mixed with other stuff. The purple one is beetroot and horseradish. Beetroot is not a bitter herb, and therefore you've ruined the taste of it. You can't do that. You need to use pure horseradish. So you need to order the fresh one, which suddenly goes up in price around this time of year, and that is you grind it up, and it can be bought from the wholesalers at somewhat reasonable prices. So the measure that each person needs is 2 medium-sized lettuce leaves with about a tablespoon of grated horseradish on top. That's about what everyone needs to do the mitzvah of eating the bitter herbs to remember the pain of the slavery in Egypt. But each person needs that twice on each night of Seder because we have it plain, dipped in the charoset, and we also eat it as a part of the Hillel sandwich. And it also needs to be that much. So it's not enough either time. It's not enough to have a little sprinkle, a tiny piece of horseradish, or to sprinkle a little bit on your matzah and have them heaped on charoset. That may taste better, but that's not fulfilling the mitzvah correctly. The mitzvah has to be done by eating the correct amount of bitter herbs, and both at the maror stage and also in the sandwich. And so each person needs their 2 pieces of lettuce and a spoonful of horseradish. If somebody is really sensitive to it, or little kids, they don't have to have the horseradish part of it. You actually fulfill the mitzvah just eating the lettuce. It does fulfill the mitzvah, but one who can should have the fresh horseradish as well. It's dipped in charoset, which is a paste that it reminds us of the cement that the Jewish people made in building the various buildings in Egypt. The Chabad custom is to limit the charoset to ground walnuts, apples, pears, and red wine. That's it. But many others add other ingredients such as cinnamon, ginger, figs, dates, pomegranates, almonds. Different communities have different customs of how they make it, and that's fine. But you just need to know what your recipe is and have all the ingredients and all that made in advance. A time saver for this, a big time saver, is to have small plates of maror and charoset spread around the table. And the same for the karpas, the vegetable that we dip in salt water, and the same for the salt water itself, and the egg, which is eaten a bit later as well. All of these things, if you have just one big bowl of it, it has to be passed around from one person to another. Can you pass it? I didn't get. And then that is a big time loss of passing around. If every 2 or 3 people, there's like a little platter, a little plate that has the lettuce that they're going to need, the horseradish they're going to need, the salt water, the vegetable to dip. There are different customs as to the karpas vegetables. Some people use parsley, some use potato, some use onion, some use karpas itself. In Israel, it's like a celery type of thing. Whatever the custom is, but to have those vegetables ready for people with a little bowl of salt water ready to dip and the eggs ready to eat. That will save a huge amount of time rather than passing it around or trying to find it. The egg, by the way, you might find that the Haggadah doesn't really give instructions about the egg. There's a Seder Plate that you have set up that has on it a boiled egg, a hard-boiled egg in its shell, and it has the bone, the chicken neck, as well as the maror, that is eaten, the lettuce and horseradish, another maror that is eaten for the sandwich, as well as the vegetable that you dip, and the charoset that you dip it in. So not all those things are eaten. The one thing, the chicken neck, is not eaten at all in the entire Seder. It's just left there. Commemorates the sacrifice that was brought. It's not eaten. It's just left there. The egg, there's no instructions in the Haggadah saying now eat the egg. Everything else, if you just follow the order of the Haggadah, it tells you when to do what. Have the first cup of wine, you have the vegetable dipped in salt water, now you eat the matzah, now you eat the maror, now you eat the sandwich. There's no instruction, now you eat the egg. And because that's only a custom, remember, it's not one of the laws of Pesach to eat the egg dipped in salt water. It's a custom, a tradition. And it's our tradition to do that at the beginning of the meal. So once we followed the order of the Haggadah, we've done the matzah, we've done the maror, we've done the sandwich, then it's customary to take an egg, dip in salt water, and to eat it at that stage. But you may forget if you're just following the order, because many Haggadah don't even say to do it, because it's a tradition, not a law. Just a little reminder. Okay, a few fun ideas to try and make it interesting, and then we'll go to questions and more discussion. So fun ideas is going to very much depend on the crowd that you have and what their inclination is. Sometimes you could make a play where you act out some of the Haggadah. You can act out Let My People Go or the 10 Plagues, just to make it a bit more fun and active and enjoyable. There are some games, and you can buy them online. Some of them are available, or you can download stuff. Little games that you can play at the Seder, like questions that you can ask. You can do a sort of a Jeopardy game, where you put an answer and people have to figure out what the question is, or different quizzes you can do as you're going along. It's fun to have. And again, if you have the right type of crowd, you can have a series of questions that people have to find the answers as we're going through the Haggadah. If you read the Haggadah, you'll find it, but here's the question. Who was the rabbi who stayed up all night until the morning on the night of the Seder? You have to find out who was that, who did that. And you get to it where you meet the rabbis who were up all night. That's a fun thing you can prepare, or you can find online stuff. Also, open-ended questions of discussion to make it more meaningful. If you have a more mature crowd, especially, to ask questions such as, on the Seder night, we're not just commemorating the exodus from Egypt, but also reliving it. Each one of us has to see ourselves as if we left Egypt, it says in the Haggadah. Well, we're not slaves to Pharaoh. We're not in Egypt. But what does Egypt mean to us? It means our own slavery, our own limitations, the things that hold us down, the things that hold us back. What are the things that we want to be freed of this year? And if you have a mature crowd, you could really get into a very deep discussion of the things that people could want to be liberated from when they're sitting at the Seder. So asking questions like that can be really good if you prepared them nicely. Brain teasers are also fun. I once made for the 10 plagues a series of brain teasers, like questions you have to match the question to one of the 10 plagues. I'll send it out so you can see it. Those type of things can be really enjoyable and fun. Also, particularly if you have kids or younger people, to get them engaged, to give them prizes on the spot for participation. Go to a $2 store in advance and buy a few little toys, little fun things that are Yontiv friendly, that can be used on Yontiv. And when a child asks a good question or shares one of their ideas or sings a song nicely, you give them a prize right away. They get something right on the spot. Often we promise prizes that we'll get them, if you're good, but if they get on the spot, they get very, very involved. One year I had a prize box, just a box that I decorate a little bit and put prizes in it. And anytime any of the kids said something, asked something, participated in any way, come and choose a prize, and they can choose their own thing. And you don't have to invest a lot in these prizes. That you can go to Kmart or any of these stores and get lots of little fun things. It's more the acknowledgement that they're getting, that they're immediately getting something. As we know, these prizes, like a few days later, don't work anymore. But it worked at the time. They were very happy at the time. I think it's also good to encourage the kids to share what they know and to participate. And their participation is what makes the Seder really special. I think that they should be rewarded for not just finding the afikoman. There's a tradition of hiding the afikoman, and whoever finds it gets a prize. I mean, that's a beautiful tradition, and that keeps them awake till the end, because that is later in the night. However, getting a prize for finding the afikoman, it's nice. I think they should more get prizes for saying the manishtana, for saying their ideas that they learned at school, things they know at the Seder, encouraging the kids to share their knowledge and rewarding them for that, I think is a much better way. And focus on the kids. You shouldn't be apologetic about focusing on the kids, even if you have various ages at the Seder, and not everyone is as proud as you might be of your kids saying everything that they learned at school. And you do have to pace it to some extent. However, I think everyone needs to be reminded, and say this at the beginning, that the real focus of the Haggadah, of the Seder, of Pesach, is to convey to the next generation our identity, our story, where we came from and why we're here. That's really the whole focus of the whole Pesach. And that's the power of the Seder night, is that it's the memories that we're creating for our children. And so even if there are those at the table who maybe it's not their kids and maybe that's not their level of interest, but everyone needs to be reminded that this is the focus. So we need to be a bit more patient and a bit more open to the kids' participation and allowing that to take center stage. At the same time, you do need to cater to your crowd. And so it would be important to speak to the kids in advance and say, I want you to choose. I know you've learned so much and you've got so much you want to share. I want you to choose a few things that you're going to tell us, especially if there's several kids at the table. Okay, you get a turn now, you get a turn now. They can't all say everything, but also, if they're told that, and if you say that nicely, then, you'll get a prize, you'll get recognized. So then the kids feel focused on and feel that they are the center stage, which they are. And at the same time, things can keep moving, because otherwise that can be a huge delay as well. If the kids they want to say, they get up, they get too shy, or they can't find the thing, or I want to say that, I want to do that, and they all say the same thing. So you do have to keep the pace going, but at the same time remembering that it really is about the kids, and they are the focus. Okay, I am going to now pause and allow questions. If anyone wants, I see in the chat there is a question here. Do women have to observe the fast of the firstborn on the 25th of March? No, it's for the firstborn males only. Any questions anyone has, you can either unmute yourself or ask. Yes, 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 yeah.
It's supposed to be the day before Pesach, because it's a Shabbat. So
it's Thursday. This year it's Thursday.
So it's Thursday night to Friday night.
No, it's Thursday morning.
Thursday morning
tonight, but the tradition is not to fast. For the fast of the firstborn, the tradition is we don't actually fast. What we do is in the morning we listen to what's called a siyum, which means at the conclusion of a section of Talmud that somebody has studied, and when you participate in that, that's a mitzvah to eat, to participate in the celebration of the conclusion of some Torah learning. And so a firstborn who participates in that does not have to fast. We will have here in Shul, at 7 a.m. on Thursday, we'll have a service followed by a siyum, such a conclusion, so the firstborns will not have to fast. Other questions, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask, or write something on the chat.
If the kids have a bag of matzah in front of them, they're going to want to munch through it during the meal. There wasn't a rule about when you can start eating matzah from?
Okay, great question. So really, from nightfall, you can eat matzah. You can't eat matzah before nightfall, but once we've made Kiddush and we're at the Seder, technically you can eat matzah. It's not the correct time to eat it yet in the order of the Seder, but it's not forbidden to eat matzah at that time. And so you have to gauge your children and their self-control, that if having a bag of matzah in front of them is going to mean that bag is going to be visited early, so then maybe they get their bag later. Or you may maybe say a child at that age, that's okay, that's fine. We don't have to be too uptight about it when a little kid does things in the wrong order. They tend to, when it's the dipping of the vegetable, they want more and more, and they eat a lot of them. Okay, that's fine. If they sometimes also, we have our cup, the second cup of wine or grape juice, we fill it up early, but we leave it sitting there for the duration. And I've witnessed some kids who they gradually sort of lean forward towards the cup, and little sips here and there. That's fine for a little kid. That's fine. But then for older children, once they're reaching an age 8 or 9 years old, where they should be educated much more, then they should be told, you need to wait till later. But technically, if they eat the matzah at that time, it's not really a problem. Okay, so what book should I buy? As mine are very old and hard to read. So like I said, they're available on Chabad.org to print the entire Haggadah for free. There's also a beautiful one that I'll send a link to it as well, that's made, it's very colorful, it's very kid-friendly, but it's actually made for adults with a lot of great insights. There are several really good ones. I'll send out a link to those who want to buy them. Any other questions or any other insights of experiences that you have? Can we eat off the Seder plate? So yes, what's placed on the Seder plate is eaten, except for the shank bone or the chicken neck. That is not eaten, but the rest of it is eaten. So the person, usually you have one Seder plate in front of the person leading the Seder, and they eat off it. But anyone can eat off the Seder plate. And so what should be, by the time you get to the meal, what should be is the Seder plate is empty, maybe a few crumbs and mess, but empty except for the bone. That's the only thing that's left there. Question: if there's no chametz from Friday morning and no matzah until the Seder Saturday night, what do we use for Kiddush Friday night? Okay, this is going to be dealt with at our class on Wednesday. We're going to speak about the peculiarities of going straight from Shabbos into Pesach. We'll discuss that then. Yes?
Are we allowed to get the Seder before Shabbat? I mean, get everything ready before Shabbat?
Before Shabbat, yes, you can get everything ready before Shabbat. You have to be careful because there could be chametz still around because it's not yet. But most people will have their house pretty much ready before Shabbos. I mean, because once Shabbos comes in, there's no real cleaning you can do. So you could have things ready for the Seder before Shabbat, and then straight after Shabbat, just sort of lay them down. Or you could have a table set already. If you're not going to use it for Shabbat, you can have it set before Shabbat. It is.
Because the Shabbat, you have to have a halal.
Yeah. That we'll talk about in the other class.
Okay.
Yeah. Keep in mind that after the meal, there is the Mitzvah of Halal, which we mentioned, saying the songs of praise, thanking God for the miracles that happened back then, and also the miracles that happen to us now and will happen to us in the final redemption as well. And so you should keep in mind and make sure everyone there also keeps in mind that there's the meal, but then there's the eating, the afikoman at the end of the meal. There's the benching, the grace after meals, the third and the fourth cup of wine that come after the meal, and the Hallel and the songs of praise. And so you want to time things at the meal as well, that people aren't sort of drifting off or starting to leave. So, it's getting late. You want to do the whole thing. And again, it's a challenge you can give people. Let's see if we can actually complete the whole thing and do it all. And that last part, you do have to move much faster. What I do at that time is I only do it in Hebrew. I don't do the English then because we're not telling stories. We're singing songs of praise. So I do it in Hebrew and I sing as much as possible, all the songs, but keeping it at a good pace so people can read along the English, sing along the songs that they know, read a bit of the insights that are in the Haggadah if they're losing track of things, and then when we get to the fourth cup, we drink the fourth cup, and then we say L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim next year in Jerusalem. That's technically the end of the Seder. There are some songs, popular songs, Chad Gadya, Echad Miyadei, and other songs that are added later. Some don't sing them at all. Many people do. But you should know that once you've said L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, you've actually completed the Seder. And the songs are like for those who want to stick around for more. It's always nice to continue. A question: what do you do with the Elijah wine afterwards? So the cup of wine that we pour for Elijah the prophet. So what do you do with the wine? So we know that the tradition is that he comes to every Seder and he drinks some of the wine. In fact, there are those who say that the custom is to pour the wine back into the bottle because we want to drink his leftovers. We actually want to take Eliyahu's leftovers and put it back into our wine bottle, and maybe tomorrow we'll make Kiddush on it or use it in the future. So we don't drink it at the Seder. Once we drunk the last four cups of wine, we don't drink any more wine, but we keep his wine, pouring it back into the bottle. So it's used in the future. The blessing is kept. Any other questions? Okay.